A few months ago, I was sitting with a friend of mine, and they were reflecting on the loss of their spouse that had just happened 8 months ago. And they were sharing their story about when they received that terminal diagnosis as a couple, and how their spouse was only supposed to live for another year after receiving that diagnosis. But what wound up happening is that their spouse lived for another 4 years after receiving that diagnosis. And they shared with me how sweet those last 4 years of their relationship was. Now, they already had a really healthy, beautiful relationship, but those last 4 years, they said, were some of the most sweet and precious time within their relationship. And so I asked them, what made those last 4 years so precious? What made them so beautiful? And they began to share, and they talked about the reality hit them both of the time being short that they had with one another, the person that they loved so deeply. And they told me how much they both wanted to savor those moments, cherish those moments. They had a fundamental shift in their mindset on how they saw life and how they saw their relationship. And what had happened for them was that terminal diagnosis brought the reality of death close. It brought it into the present moment. And after I left my conversation with them, I was really reflecting on this truth that we all have a terminal diagnosis. It's called being human. We're all going to die. And I'm not trying to be morbid here, but it's just the reality of it. We're all going to die, but most of us live life, me included, like we're going to live forever. And what a terminal diagnosis does is it brings that reality home. We can no longer pretend like we're going to live forever. We can no longer ignore that life is passing us by minute, day by day. And we can no longer ignore the choices that we're making, or we become so aware of the choices that we're making each day in this short time that we have left. And it changes the things that we value and we put our attention on. And the research shows us that people will often live differently after receiving a diagnosis. And the people who love the people who have received a terminal diagnosis also can start to live differently as well as they become aware of that ticking clock. And I have to admit, since that conversation, I've been asking myself the question, what would happen if I lived my life like I have a terminal diagnosis? Because once again, I do, you do, and it's called being human. And none of us get to escape that reality. I know some people are trying to figure out how we can escape that reality, but for now, we all have a terminal diagnosis. We are all going to die. And if we were to live that way, and if we were to have the realization, and it were to really hit home, how would you live your life? How would I live my life? What would be different? And let's go back to that original question that I talked about in the beginning of, I'll be happy when? I mean, if we lived like we had a terminal diagnosis, would we give ourselves the permission to let go of the I'll be happy when? That when part. Could we shift it to I'll be happy? I am giving myself the permission to be happy. It's a powerful shift in our mentality when we start to think about the fact that the only thing that's keeping us from being happy is our mindset that we have to get to a place where we can give ourselves the permission to be happy. Because what we're doing when we don't give ourselves that permission is we're robbing ourselves from life, from the experiences that are right in front of us, because we keep putting it out there somewhere, right? That when I arrive to XYZ point, then I can be happy. But I want to encourage you on something. There's no guarantee that you're even going to get to that finish line of what you think is going to make you happy. And so you're delaying your happiness, thinking that when you get there, you're going to then be happy. But the truth is, once again, you might not ever get to that place. Life's short, as we've just talked about. And this is the reality and the conversation that you'll hear from many people when they're on their deathbed. I wish I would have given myself permission to be happy, to stop worrying about things so much, and to make deep connections to people, to myself, and to life. And when a person hasn't given themselves that permission, and they've been waiting their entire lives to give themselves that permission, and they show up in that moment where death is a reality and it's knocking on the door, one of the biggest regrets is I didn't give myself permission to enjoy life sooner, that I was waiting for all of these external circumstances to be just right before I could have that permission. But let me just encourage you and say it again. You can give yourself permission today to be happy